Hey there, this is Philip from Beyond the Tabletop. This is a first in a series about the Cyclops demolition vehicle from Forgeworld, and I'll be showing you how to build it and paint it. In this video in particular, I'm covering how to build the model and how to prep it for painting. I'm painting these guys up for my Krieg, so I'll be following my standard Krieg painting guide, the basics of which are covered in the Storm Chimera video. I've just got a spare guardsman here, he's missing his arms, but it gives you a good sense of the scale just to show you how small these models are. Now I want to show you what they look like up close just before I paint them, and just give you a quick guide on all the little tricky bits in terms of the build. So it's a pretty small model, as you can see. It's a bit like a mini Lehman Russ. It's made of 3 parts, the hull being the first one, and then the tracks either side of the other 2 parts. Now before I assembled these guys, I made sure that I washed the resin. There's a how-to guide that you can check out on that. It was a relatively simple build. I just had to green stuff some of the gaps, just where the hull meets the tracks. And you can see there was a couple of like little air bubbles just along the engine units and a couple of other places. So just on the backs here and here, that's where the gates join the model. So that required cutting those out and just cleaning it up slightly. Otherwise the tracks look pretty good. I mean, the casting of the model is okay. You can definitely tell it's one of their older models. Some of the tracks look ever so slightly wobbly. They've just not got that kind of pristine, crisp look that some of the newer, especially the 3D printed ones, have. I've definitely noticed when looking at some of the older photos that this eyepiece here used to be a lot more circular, and it definitely isn't now. As you can see, it sort of goes off a sharp angle on either side, whereas online, some of the original photos, that looks a lot more circular. So I presume that's partly due to the aged mould, or when the master mould maybe needed fixing, that they actually changed the design of it ever so slightly. I mean, it'll be okay. I think it will look better once painted up, and you can definitely paint in the circle on the inside to give it that shape back. The only addition that I made was the arial, so that was just involved drilling that down and putting in a small bit of brass rod. I think it was about 1mm. Now I've switched from my usual plastic bristles to rod because it's a lot more sturdier, and I tend to find with the plastic bristles that they actually bend quite a bit over time and can also quite easily snap off, especially when it's kept in my foam storage. Now before painting them, I've just based them on some cork and some resin blocks using some rod. It just means it will be much easier to pick up and paint, trying to get all the detail in without having to worry about holding the model and getting kind of fingerprints on the paintwork. As you can see at the bottom, there's a little circular design where I drilled the hole in. That just seemed quite a fitting place for it to go. I just applied a small bit of glue to the very tip of the rod that will just hold it all in place. But it's not too much that it will be difficult to break off. I think just a little wiggle should see the rod snap free from the model. Now we're ready for painting. The next step is to prime the model. I'm just going to get my airbrush and give them a good coat with my black primer. Now before I put the primer on, I'm going to go outside and give these guys a quick spray with my Purity Seal. Now the Purity Seal is a matte varnish. It sticks really well to the resin surface and now just gives a better surface for the primer to stick to. So here we are, I've undercoated the 3 models. Now with the airbrush primer, it's always good to do a very light dusting initially and then let that dry, and then just go in and keep building up those coats till you get a nice solid all over finish. Just making sure you do all the little gaps and corners, because that's always going to be the hardest bit for the airbrush to reach. So with that done, I've now been just taping up the tracks. So I've got a little spool of 6mm Tamiya tape. Now I've just been using that to mask off the tracks. I've not been too neat about it because I'm not too fussed about the sides along the edging, but I've just been careful not to actually cover up any of the hull, which is going to be painted grey. Now using the Tamiya tape is just going to save me a bit of time later on. I won't have to paint the tracks back up black. Instead I'll just have to do a little touch up around the sides. I'm going to wrap this video up here. The next video will focus on putting down those base colours on the tank, as well as adding on the transfers. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe. Feel free to share it with all your friends if you think they'll find it useful. Don't forget you can head over to beyondthetabletop.com. It features some exclusive content and battle reports which aren't available on YouTube. If you can't wait for the next video, head over to my Facebook and Instagram page where I post daily. That's all for now. Until the next video, take care.